You worked at IBM for over 40 years, starting as a systems engineer, and you ran the company as chairman, president, CEO from 2011 to 2020. IBM is one of the largest tech companies in the world with, maybe you can correct me on this, with about 280,000 employees. What are the biggest challenges running the company of that size? Let's start with a sort of big overview question.
The biggest challenges, I think, are not in running them, it's in changing them. And that idea to know what you should change and what you should not change. Actually, people don't always ask that question. What should endure, even if it has to be modernized, but what should endure? And then I found the hardest part was changing how work got done at such a big company.
What was the parts that you thought should endure? The core of the company that was beautiful and powerful and could persist through time, that
Yeah.
it should persist through time.
I'd be interested. Do you have a perception of what you think it would be?
Do I have a perception? Well, I'm a romantic for a history of long-running companies, so there's kind of a tradition. As a AI person, to me, IBM has some epic sort of research accomplishments
Yes.
where you show off, Deep Blue and Watson, just impressive big moonshot challenges and
Yes.
accomplishing those.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably a small part of what IBM is. That's mostly like the sexy public facing part.
Yeah.
Right?
No, well, certainly the research part itself, right, is over 3,000. So it's not that small. That's a pretty
Yes,
big
it's
research
big,
group.
yes.
But the part that should endure ends up being, a company that does things that are essential to the world, meaning think back, you said you're romantic. It was the 30s, the Social Security system. It was putting the man on the moon. It was, to this day, banks don't run, railroads don't run. That is at its core, it's doing mission critical work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part, I think, is at its core, it's a business to business company. And at its core, it's about doing things that are really important to the world running and being better.
Running the infrastructure of the world, so doing it at scale, doing it reliably.
Yes, secure in this world, that's like everything. And in fact, when I started, I almost felt people were looking for what that was. And together we sort of, in a word, was to be essential. And the reason I loved that word was I can't call myself essential. You have to determine I am, right? So it was to be essential, even though some of what we did is exactly what you said, it's below the surface. So many people, because people say to me, well, what does IBM do now, right? And over the years, it's changed so much. And today, it's really a software and consulting company. Consulting is a third of it. And the software is all hybrid cloud and AI. That would not have been true, as you well know, back even 2 decades ago, right? So it changes. But I think at its core, it's that be essential. You said moonshot. Can't all be moonshots because moonshots don't always work, but mission critical work.
So given the size, though, when you started running it, did you feel the sort of thing that people usually associate with size, which is bureaucracy and maybe the aspect of size that hinder progress or hinder pivoting? Did you feel that?
You would, for lots of reasons. I think when you're a big company, sometimes people think of process as the client themselves, or I always say to people, your process is not your customer. There is a real customer here that you exist for. And that's really easy to fall into because people are a master or to this process, and that's not right. And when you're big, the other thing, and boy, there's a premium on it, is speed, right? That in our industry, you got to be fast. And go back, like when I took over and it was 2012, we had a lot of catching up to do and a lot of things to do, and it was moving so fast. And as you well know, all those trends were happening at once, which made them go even faster. And so pretty unprecedented actually for that many trends to be at one time. And I used to say to people, go faster, go faster, go faster. And honestly, I've tired them out. I mean, it kind of dawned on me that when you're that big, it's a really valuable lesson. And it taught me like the hows, perhaps more important than the what. Because if I didn't do something to change how work was done, like change those processes or, give them new tools, help them with skills, they couldn't. They'll just like do the same thing faster. If someone tells you, you've got hiking boots and they're like, no, go run a marathon. You're like, I can't do it in those boots. But so you've got to do something. And at first, I think the ways for big companies, I would call them like blunt clubs. You do what everyone does. You reduce layers. Because if you reduce layers, decisions go faster. It's math.
Mhm.
If there's less decision points, things go faster. You do the blunt club thing. And then after that, though, it did lead me down a long journey of, they sound like buzzwords, but if you really do them at scale, they're hard, around things like agile. And because you've really got to change the way work gets done. And we ended up training, God, hundreds of thousands of people on that stuff
On how
to
to
really
do
change
agile
it,
correctly.
on how to do it correctly. That's right. Versus, because everybody talks about it, but the idea that you would really have small multidisciplinary teams work from the outside in, set those sort of interim steps, take the feedback, pivot, and then do it on not just products, do it on lots of things, it's hard to do at scale. People always say, "Oh, I got this agile group over here of 40 people." But not when you're a couple 100,000 people. You got to get a
Yeah.
lot of people to work that
So
way.
the blunt club thing you're talking about,
Mhm.
so flatten the organization as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. I probably reduced the layers of management by half. And so it that has lots of benefits, right? Time to a decision, more autonomy to people, and then the idea of like faster clarity of where you're going, because you're not just filtered through so many different layers. And I think it's the kind of thing a lot of companies, if you're big, have to just keep going through. It's kind of like grass grows, it just comes back, and you got to go back down and work on it. So it's a natural thing. Um, but I hear so many people talk about it, Lex, this idea of like, okay, well, who makes a decision? You've often heard nobody can say yes and everybody can say no. And that's actually what you're trying to get out of a system like that.